Sarah Mitchell never imagined that a phone call for a new job opportunity would change her life. When the phone rang that rainy morning, the voice on the other end was formal and distant. "We urgently need your services." "The patient is Andrew Collins," the man said. The name made Sarah freeze for a moment. Andrew Collins, the most powerful name in town, the reclusive millionaire everyone talked about, was in a vegetative state. Within a day, she found herself passing through the gates of the Collins estate, an imposing symbol of wealth and power. The air was heavy, laden with something Sarah couldn't quite define, a mix of mystery and tension. She was greeted by Charles Collins, the eldest son. His expression was cold, calculating, as if hiring her was just a formality. "I assume you understand the gravity of the situation. My father, he's not really here anymore. We're just waiting for authorization to disconnect the machines," he said in a voice nearly devoid of emotion. Sarah looked at him, trying to gauge what he was feeling, but all she could read was indifference. Charles didn't seem concerned about his father's condition. Everything felt like a procedure, a formality before the end. She wondered what was really going on in that house. "He's still alive, even if in a vegetative state," Sarah responded softly. "As long as there's life, there's always something we can do." Charles merely nodded, without commitment, and led her to the room where Andrew was. The room was dark, the curtains almost drawn, leaving just a sliver of light. There, surrounded by machines keeping him alive, was Andrew Collins. His skin was pale, his face thin, and his hands lay motionless on the sheets. The rhythmic sound of the ventilator filled the room, almost hypnotic. Next to the bed was an unexpected figure, Lily, Andrew's wife. She looked nervous, her eyes fixed on her husband as Charles introduced Sarah. Once Charles left, Lily turned to Sarah. "Do you believe in miracles?" she asked, her voice low and trembling. Sarah hesitated for a moment. "I believe unexpected things can happen, yes. Why do you ask?" Lily turned her gaze back to her unconscious husband. "He wasn't an easy man, but I feel like there's still something he needs to say but can't." Lily's words echoed in Sarah's mind for the rest of the night. As she monitored Andrew, she felt a strange connection. There was something in the silence that seemed to pulse with life, something beyond what the eyes could see. Even without moving a muscle, Andrew felt present in some way. In the following weeks, Sarah dedicated herself to his care, talking to him as if he could hear her, hoping that somehow her presence would make a difference. But the date to disconnect the machines was approaching quickly, and no one seemed to believe that Andrew had any chance of returning. It was on a particularly cold and silent night that something happened. As Sarah adjusted the blanket over Andrew, she felt something strange, a light squeeze on the hand that was holding his. Her heart raced. Could it have been a reflex? A spasm? But then, the monitors started to fluctuate. Vital signs that had been stable for weeks suddenly showed activity. She looked at Andrew, and for the first time since she started working there, she noticed something different. The millionaire was trying to communicate. She leaned in, bringing her ear close to his mouth, and then she heard it. "Don't let me die. There's something important." Sarah stepped back, her heart pounding. It wasn't her imagination. Andrew Collins, the man everyone thought was lost forever, had spoken, and he seemed to carry a secret that no one else knew. What did he want to say? What truth was buried in that forced silence? The air in the room seemed to freeze around Sarah. The vegetative millionaire, previously motionless and silent, had spoken. She still had his hand in hers, her heart beating too fast. Sarah glanced at the monitor. The vital signs were slightly altered, but still within the range considered stable for a patient in his condition. Anyone else might think she had imagined it, but Sarah knew what she heard. "Don't let me die." The words echoed in her mind. How could someone in a vegetative state speak? Maybe it had been a last effort, a flicker of consciousness before losing his connection to the outside world for good. Sarah forced herself to take a deep breath and organize her thoughts. She had to act, but how? Should she tell the family? Would they even believe her? As she left the room, she felt Charles's eyes on her. He was waiting for any sign that the machines would be turned off soon. "Everything all right, nurse?" Charles asked with his usual coldness. Sarah hesitated. She couldn't say anything without proof. He had a slight increase in vital signs, but nothing unusual for someone in his condition, she replied, carefully measuring each word. Charles made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "We're getting closer to the final moment. There's nothing else that can be done. Keep me informed." As he turned his back and walked away, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Something about his calm demeanor bothered her. It felt rehearsed. Before resuming her work, she decided to find Lily. The conversation with Andrew's wife was still fresh in her mind. Maybe she could understand what was happening. When Sarah reached the room where Lily usually stayed, she found her standing with her back to the door, looking out the window. Sarah knocked gently. "Lily, can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked, trying not to sound alarmed. Lily turned slowly, and Sarah noticed her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "Of course. What's going on?" Sarah hesitated for a second before stepping closer. "Something happened with Andrew. I was with him, adjusting the blanket, and I felt a squeeze on my hand. He spoke to me, Lily." Lily's eyes widened in surprise. "What did he say?" "He told me not to let him die, and that there's something important. Does that make any sense to you?" Sarah whispered, the tension rising in her chest. Lily glanced at the door, as if afraid someone might be listening. I knew he was still in there, somehow. But Charles doesn't want to wait. He's so focused on disconnecting the machines that he doesn't even care to understand what Andrew might be trying to say." Lily's voice broke, and Sarah could sense the fear she was hiding. "Do you think he knows something? Something Andrew wanted to keep secret?" Lily closed her eyes, as if the truth was too painful to face. Andrew was investigating Charles. Before the accident, he started to suspect some of the financial decisions Charles was making. He said he found something serious, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. Shortly after that, the accident happened, and Andrew ended up like this. I'm certain he was trying to warn me about something. Sarah's mind raced. So that was it. There was something dark behind Andrew's condition, something Charles didn't want anyone to discover. The accident might not have been just a misfortune. What do you think we should do? Sarah asked, feeling the urgency of the situation. Lily looked at her with a mix of desperation and determination. There's a safe in Andrew's office. He kept important documents there. I'm sure whatever he found is inside that safe. But Charles would never let me go in there alone. We have to figure out the code or find the key, Sarah said, her mind already racing with plans. I need to see those documents before the machines are turned off. If there's anything that proves Andrew shouldn't be in this condition, we can't let it die with him. Lily nodded. I'll help you, but we need to be discreet. Before they could say more, firm footsteps echoed down the hall. Sarah barely had time to move before Charles entered the room, his suspicious gaze falling on them. Is there a problem here? He asked, his tone guarded. Lily forced a smile. We were just talking about how things will change once all this is over. Charles narrowed his eyes but said nothing. When he left the room, Sarah felt her heart return to a normal rhythm. They had to act fast. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. Andrew's words and Lily's revelation echoed in her mind like a drum, each beat accelerating the passage of time. There's something important. If what Lily said was true, and every instinct in Sarah pointed to it, the secret Andrew had been trying to reveal was on the verge of being buried forever, along with him. Lying in the guest bed of the mansion, She could hear the distant sound of the machines in Andrew's room, each beep like a sinister clock marking the time she had left to uncover the truth. The thought that Charles might have been involved in his own father's accident gnawed at her, but it also explained the urgency with which he wanted the machines turned off. The next morning, Sarah found Lily already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly stirring a cup of coffee. "We need a plan," Sarah said, sitting across from her, her voice low so no one would overhear. Lily nodded, her eyes still heavy with exhaustion. "Andrew's safe is in the office. The problem is, Charles always keeps the doors locked, and I've never known the code. He's extremely private about his things." Sarah thought for a moment. "Maybe we can get in while Charles is busy if we can also distract Dr. Warren. Do you think you could find something to help us open the safe?" Lily bit her lip, looking thoughtful. "I know Andrew kept a notebook with personal notes. He wrote everything down. There might be something in it that could help." That afternoon, Sarah suggested to Charles that he take a break from the stress and visit the family lawyer, claiming it would be important to review the paperwork before the machines were turned off. He nodded, seeming to approve the idea, and shortly after, he left the mansion. Lily did the same with Dr. Warren, asking him to go into town to handle the details related to an early death certificate. Finally, the house was nearly empty. Sarah and Lily wasted no time. They hurried upstairs toward Charles's office. As expected, the door was locked. "I know where Charles keeps the key," Lily whispered, going to a small cabinet in the hallway. After a few seconds of searching, she pulled out a silver key. "He always thinks no one will look here." With their hearts racing, Sarah and Lily unlocked the door and stepped into the office. The room was a blend of luxury and austerity, with shelves of meticulously aligned books, a large mahogany desk, and in the corner, the safe. Next to it, on the desk, lay an old leather notebook, partially open. "This is it," Lily said, picking up the notebook with trembling hands. "He wrote down all the important details in here." Sarah quickly flipped through the pages. There were records of transactions, names of people Andrew had done business with, and then one page caught her attention. "Safe code" was written in cursive at the top of the page, followed by a sequence of numbers. "Lily, we found it," Sarah said, barely able to contain her excitement. Both of them approached the safe, and Sarah punched in the numbers. The metallic sound of the mechanism turning was like a thunderclap in the heavy silence of the office. The safe opened. Inside was a stack of documents, some bearing the logo of Andrew's company, others marked with lawyers and financial consultant seals. Sarah grabbed the first document and began reading aloud. "Charles Collins, involvement in financial fraud, embezzlement from the company, bribery of officials." Lily gasped, steadying herself against the desk. So that was it. Andrew was about to expose him. Sarah continued sifting through the papers until she found a detailed report. She could hardly believe what she was reading. "Lily, this says Andrew's accident was staged. A planned detour, the car sabotaged. It was all orchestrated to look like an accident, but Charles was behind it." Lily's face turned pale. He tried to kill his own father. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. Sarah and Lily froze. Charles had returned earlier than expected. "What do we do?" Lily whispered, panic rising in her voice. Before they could react, the office door burst open. Charles stood there, his eyes dark with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice cold and sharp, like a blade. Sarah tried to keep her composure, clutching the documents tightly to her chest. "We know what you did, Charles. Andrew knew, and now we know too." Charles took a step forward, his jaw clenched. "You have no idea what you're getting yourselves into. You can't prove anything. And even if you could, no one would believe you." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the distant sound of the machines in Andrew's room, still fighting to keep him alive. The moment seemed to freeze, and Sarah could feel the threat hanging in the air, as palpable as the heavy atmosphere weighing down on her and Lily. Charles stood before them like a caged beast, his eyes burning with anger. She knew they were in danger. They had uncovered everything. The documents in Sarah's hands were the proof Andrew had been desperately trying to reveal, and now she and Lily had to survive long enough to expose the truth. "Charles, I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined you were capable of this," Lily said, her voice low, trembling. Charles sneered at his father's wife. "You're more foolish than I thought, Lily. Always so distracted, so wrapped up in your own insecurities. Andrew was about to destroy everything I built. He wasn't a saint. He did far worse things, and I just followed his lead." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. The man before her seemed to justify his actions as if they were the only possible course. But nothing could justify trying to murder his own father. "Followed his lead?" Sarah interrupted, trying to buy time and keep Charles talking. "You tried to kill Andrew out of greed. He was going to expose you. That's who you really are. What else are you willing to do to make sure no one finds out?" Charles's eyes narrowed. "I'll do whatever it takes. And you, nurse, should have stayed in your place. You have no idea what you're getting into." Lily, now pale-faced, seemed to be battling the panic rising within her. "Charles, please, think about what you're doing. You can't keep this up. If Andrew wakes up, he won't wake up." Charles interrupted, furious. "It's been too long. He's only alive because of those machines, and once they're off, it's over. And the only inheritance left will be mine." Before Sarah could react, Charles lunged forward, trying to grab the papers she held tightly in her hands. There was a moment of chaos as the documents scattered across the floor, the sound of paper rustling filling the office. Sarah shoved Charles with all her strength, enough to buy them a few precious seconds. She knew they couldn't take him on physically. "Lily, run," Sarah shouted, grabbing as many documents as she could. Lily hesitated for a second, frozen by fear, but then something within her shifted. With a quick nod, she followed Sarah down the hallway as Charles cursed behind them. They rushed down the stairs, hearing his footsteps growing closer. Sarah knew they didn't have much time. As they reached the kitchen, Lily looked at Sarah, desperate. "Where do we go? He's going to find us, and we can't get out of the house without going past him." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to think quickly. "The police. We need to call the police. We have the documents as proof. That should be enough to start an investigation." Lily frantically nodded, grabbing the kitchen phone with trembling hands. As she dialed, Sarah kept her eyes on the entryway, waiting for Charles to appear at any moment. But then, a chilling sound filled the house. The steady rhythm of the machines in Andrew's room stopped. Sarah looked at Lily in shock. He turned off the machines. Lily dropped the phone. "No, he can't do that. Andrew still has a chance to survive." Sarah bolted down the hallway towards Andrew's room, with Lily close behind. When they reached the door, they saw Charles standing by the ventilator, his hands still on the switch that had powered off the life support. The room was eerily quiet, except for the sound of Andrew's labored breathing, now unaided by the machine. "You've gone mad," Lily screamed, rushing to her husband's bedside. "It was inevitable, Lily," Charles replied coldly. "Now it's just a matter of time." Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach as she looked at Andrew. He was breathing, albeit with difficulty, his face twisted in pain. But then, something unexpected happened. Andrew's eyes opened, slowly, but with a startling clarity. "No," he murmured, his voice hoarse but unmistakable. Charles stepped back, shock flashing across his face. "This isn't possible." Andrew, with an effort that seemed superhuman, turned his head slightly towards Sarah and Lily. His voice was weak, but the words were clear. "Get the papers. Show everything. Don't let him win." It was like a beacon of hope in the middle of chaos. Andrew was conscious enough to confirm everything Sarah and Lily already knew. The truth was out, spoken by a man everyone thought was lost. "You're finished, Charles," Sarah said, her voice now steady. "Andrew's not dying today." Charles, utterly stunned, looked between Andrew and the two women. He knew the fight was over, but there was something sinister in his expression, as though he had one last trick to play. With Andrew awake and confirming everything, Sarah and Lily knew they had to act fast to make sure the truth came to light before Charles had another chance to destroy everything. What more could Charles have up his sleeve, and how would Sarah protect Andrew and the secrets he'd kept? The room seemed frozen in time. Andrew's heavy breathing filled the silence as Charles stood paralyzed, his face torn between anger and disbelief. After being trapped in his immobile body for so long, Andrew had awakened. The words he managed to murmur confirmed everything. Charles's conspiracy, the staged accident, and the desperate attempt to stop the truth from surfacing. Sarah and Lily knew they couldn't wait any longer. Every second counted, and Andrew, though conscious, was in a critical condition. Sarah grabbed the kitchen phone, where Lily had tried calling the police earlier, and with shaky hands, dialed again. "What do you think you're doing?" Charles finally broke the silence, his voice laced with barely controlled rage. He moved towards Sarah but stopped when he saw Lily step between them. "It's over, Charles," Lily said with a calmness that surprised even herself. "Andrew is alive, and he knows everything. There's no more hiding. You really think it's that simple?" Charles's voice now held a veiled threat. He seemed to regain his composure, as if he were plotting his next move. "Andrew may have spoken, but no one will believe a man who's been in a vegetative state for months. And besides, you two are the only witnesses, and that can change." Sarah forced herself to remain calm as she waited for the call to connect. "We have the documents that prove everything, and now, with Andrew awake, you won't get away with this." Charles let out a bitter laugh. "Ah yes, the documents. You think that's going to stop me? Nothing will change the fact that Andrew is as good as dead. And you too. You're in deeper than you realize." Lily stepped forward, locking eyes with her stepson. "You tried to kill your own father, and even now, you feel no remorse. How could you sink so low into your own greed, Charles?" Before he could respond, the phone in Sarah's hand finally connected. 911. "What's your emergency?" Sarah quickly explained the situation, keeping her eyes fixed on Charles. "We're at the Collins residence. Andrew Collins' son is involved in a crime. We have evidence that he attempted to kill his own father and is trying to cover it up. We need help urgently." On the other end of the line, the dispatcher's voice became more serious. "Understood. A unit is on its way. Stay where you are." Sarah hung up and stepped back, trying to keep an eye on Charles. He, in turn, was tense, his eyes calculating their every move. "You made a big mistake underestimating me, nurse," he said with contempt. "Neither of you is leaving this house alive." And then, before Sarah could react, Charles spun around and bolted toward Andrew's room, moving so quickly it seemed he had planned this all along. "Lily, stay with Andrew," Sarah shouted as she raced after Charles. He sprinted down the hall, heading for the downstairs. Sarah followed, adrenaline pumping through her veins. Each step echoed in the massive mansion, and she knew time wasn't on their side. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she saw Charles in the living room, near an old bookshelf. He was frantically pulling open a hidden drawer, from which he drew a silver pistol. Sarah froze, her heart pounding. He was armed. "Charles, you don't have to do this," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady, though she was terrified. "The police are already on their way. If you surrender now, there's still a chance to face this without making it worse." Charles, with the gun pointed at Sarah, gave a cold smile. "Do you really think I'm going to surrender? Andrew's already as good as dead, but I can still get out of this. You two are going to pay for crossing me." At that moment, Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, her face filled with both determination and pain. She shouted, "Charles, stop. You're going to lose everything. Don't you see? Nothing is worth what you're about to do." Charles turned to her, the gun still raised. "This is all because of you, Lily. If you had stayed by my side, none of this would have happened." Before he could act, the sound of police sirens filled the mansion, signaling that justice was close. Charles turned toward the front door, panic now evident on his face. "No!" he yelled, running toward the back of the house. Without thinking, Sarah ran after him. She couldn't let him escape. When she reached the kitchen, she saw Charles struggling to open the door that led to the back exit. But before he could make his escape, the flashing red and blue lights already filled the garden. The police burst into the house, weapons drawn, shouting commands for Charles to surrender. He hesitated, still clutching the gun, but as he realized he was surrounded, he let the gun fall to the ground, defeated. "It's over," Sarah whispered to herself, finally feeling the weight of the tension lift. Charles was handcuffed and taken outside, while Lily descended the stairs in tears, finally free from his manipulation and control. The morning was cold and gray, but the Collins mansion was strangely calm, as though the months of tension had finally dissipated. Charles had been taken away, and the threat over Sarah and Lily seemed to have vanished, but a shadow still loomed over the house. Andrew. Sarah returned to Andrew's room, where doctors were closely monitoring his condition. The machines that had been keeping him alive were now being adjusted with extra care, but his breathing was still irregular. He had woken up, but his body was frail, and the brief consciousness he had shown seemed to drain him of all his strength. Lily sat beside his bed, holding his hand. Her eyes were filled with hope and pain. She knew Andrew had fought to stay alive long enough to expose the truth, but now, perhaps, that fight was coming to an end. "Will he make it?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. Sarah glanced at the vital signs, uncertain. "He's fighting, but it's still a tough road ahead. We've done all we can. Now it's up to him." Silence fell over the room, and for a long moment, it seemed as though Andrew's fate was sealed. Then, a soft, almost imperceptible sound filled the air. Andrew squeezed Lily's hand. Lily let out a shaky breath and leaned in closer. "Andrew, are you here with me?" Andrew's eyes opened again, this time with more clarity. He looked at Lily, and though he was weak, his lips curved into a small smile. I'm here," he whispered. Tears rolled down Lily's face. After so many months of uncertainty, despair, and fear, her husband was finally there, conscious, fighting for his life. Sarah stepped back, allowing the couple their moment of intimacy. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but seeing Andrew alive and alert gave her a sense of relief. That afternoon, the police returned to the mansion to gather more evidence. The documents Sarah and Lily had found in Andrew's safe were being analyzed, and the full story of Charles's fraud and his plot to kill his father was being carefully pieced together. The district attorney had already declared that Charles would be indicted for attempted murder, conspiracy, and corporate fraud, but there was still one more thing to be done. A few days later, with Andrew finally stable in the hospital, Sarah and Lily met with the family lawyer and a team of investigators. They had called a press conference to reveal the truth to the world. Lily stepped onto the stage, still pale but with a new strength in her eyes. She took a deep breath before she began to speak. "Today, the truth about what happened to my husband, Andrew Collins, will finally be known. For months, we were led to believe that the car accident that nearly took his life was a tragedy. But now we know it was an attempted murder, orchestrated by none other than his own son, Charles Collins. The crowd of reporters murmured, cameras flashing as they captured the moment. With the help of Sarah, a brave and determined woman, we were able to uncover the evidence that Andrew tried to reveal before he lost consciousness. He knew his son was involved in schemes of corruption and fraud, and when Andrew tried to stop him, Charles tried to end his life. But he failed. Andrew is alive, and now, with the support of the justice system, we will ensure that the truth is exposed. Lily looked over at Sarah, who stood at the back of the room, proud of Lily's courage. It had been a long road, but finally, the truth was being told. Months later, spring had arrived, and the Collins mansion, despite its dark memories, seemed lighter, as though an invisible weight had been lifted. Andrew, still recovering, sat in a wheelchair in the garden, watching the flowers bloom around him. Sarah joined him, carrying a tray with tea. "You're getting stronger every day, Andrew. Soon you'll be back on your feet." Andrew smiled at her, his face still tired, but with a new light in his eyes. "All of this is thanks to you, Sarah. If it weren't for your persistence, I never would have had the chance to see the truth come out." She nodded, feeling grateful to have been part of it. "I just did what I thought was right. You fought too, Andrew, and in the end we won." Lily joined them in the garden shortly after, sitting beside Andrew. "Justice is being served. Charles will be convicted, and finally, our family can move forward." Andrew took Lily's hand, their connection stronger than ever. Despite everything they had been through, their love had survived, just like the truth. As Sarah looked out over the horizon, she knew this would be her last visit to the mansion. The mission that had brought her there was complete. Andrew was safe, the truth had been revealed, and Charles would pay for his crimes. She smiled softly, ready to move on with her own life. But in that moment, there was a sense of peace that would stay with her wherever she went. The story had ended, but the impact of everything they had lived through would remain forever.